All right, so we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's talk about the ugly. As I've said before, and I've told people before, sometimes they're like, I don't understand the difference between the bad and the ugly. The bad in your case is those things that you're going to have to address, that you can provide context to. The ugly are those things that could potentially bring your case down depending on a particular situation. Let me tell you about a good example. I had a friend of mine years ago, I was representing in a particular case. They had a covenant not to compete. These are what we call non-compete agreements. Now, for those of you who have never heard of those before, non-compete agreements are contracts between the employer, typically between an employer and employee, where effectively they're telling you, well, if you leave here, you can't work for my competitor in this particular, or a competitor of mine in the area that we do in this particular area for this length of time. Now, it's a contract, so it's not like a non-compete, police that are out there. But this is the way I had, the question that was posed to me was, okay, what happens if I breach this? Meaning, if you decide, and I told them, I said, okay, let me give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good part is, and this is the real deal, I said the good part of this is that if you're breaching and so forth, the problem that you may run across is that if the employer never enforces this at all, you can make the argument that this is really kind of a pro forma type. Depending on the jurisdiction, talk to an attorney, do not rely solely on what I just said. The bad part is that you are in breach of a contract, so they have a cause of action against you. The other part is that if you decided to go work for a competitor, there's a potential that they could go after the competitor for what we call tortious interference with business practices. In other words, you hired somebody who is now becoming a threat to me financially because they're taking the knowledge that they've acquired from me and they're giving it to you. You're benefiting from it and it's hurting me, pay me. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, that's the ugly part. Here's the other uglier part. Fairly good chance you're probably going to get fired right after that, because what happens is that you've literally brought another employer into a situation where they're now having to worry about having to fight in court about a contract that you were aware of that maybe you didn't tell them about, and put them in financial and legal jeopardy because you chose to breach a contract in order to work for them. That's ugly. Why? One, now you got a lawsuit with regards to breach of contract for one. You're probably going to have the place you're working for now filing some type of indemnification action. In other words, saying, if we get sued or we lose, you got to go after them for the money. It's possible from that instance. But also you've created this reputational issue around yourself as well, because you've now put yourself in jeopardy. Not saying that the employer is going to tell anybody that, but you've got a public record because they filed in court showing that this is what happens. That's just an example. And like I said, the laws may have changed differently and so forth. And they're kind of wild because this example I just provided to you is really no good way of breaking a contract, because you're not supposed to break a contract. But the point I was ultimately trying to make is that the bad part is literally you're in breach of contract. But the ugly part is all the things that could come from it. Meaning the employer could sue you. They could also sue like if you decide to go and start your own business, that's one thing. But if you're going to go work for somebody and take that with you, you've now put that person in jeopardy. So now they're probably, not only is that your former boss suing you, your former boss is also probably suing the person you're working for. They're just not really going to like you that much. So sometimes there are times where attorneys are telling you the ugly, the things that are so bad that no matter how much you address it, it's going to bring your case down. There's nothing that can be done with it. You can't, fall on the court and sword of the court. You can't beg for the court to be merciful. If the law and your facts are such that literally your recourse is kind of jacked up, that's the hardcore reality of these situations. So I often tell people is that I want you to know the ugly, because in some instances, and there are sometimes I've had ugly situations where I've had to get out of the case because the case was so ugly. But you need to know that there may be times that there are situations in your case that are so ugly that there's nothing you can do except let the case go.